Okay, today I'm going to show you how to do your painting for your figures in motion project. Remember, you're going to have a big piece of paper that's going to be your background paper, and then you're going to have a smaller paper that's going to be used for your figure that you're going to cut out. So when you're picking your color schemes, it's really important to think through what color schemes will have some contrast between them to help your figure stand out from the background. The first thing that you need to do is look at your notes and determine which color scheme you want to use. These two that you're seeing here, these would be complementary colors. So we have blue, violet, and yellow, orange. And I did tints and shades of those colors so that there would be a lot of contrast. Here you have an analogous cool color scheme. So red violet to blue, creating an analogous color scheme here. And then here on this one I did the opposite side. So a warm analogous color scheme. So from red to orange to yellow orange. You could also do cool and warm. So here I have all the blues, violets, greens, and here I have all the reds, oranges, and yellows. It really is up to you. When you're ready to start painting, the first thing you're going to want to do is put your name and hour at the bottom of your paper. And remember, you're going to have two pieces of paper, so you need to do this step twice. Okay? And my suggestion as well would be to write background on the large paper and figure on the other paper. I would also take, and you could write the colors that you're planning on doing on this paper as well. My example, I'm going to work with monochromatic red color scheme, and I'm going to use red, red plus white, red plus black. Okay, so that would be one. And then on the opposite, I need to choose something that's entirely different. So I could go with its complement, I could go with green, but I don't want this to feel, sometimes we associate that with a holiday, so I might choose to do something a little bit different and go with cool colors. Okay, so those would be some of my cool colors. Okay, once you are ready to do your painting, you're going to need to get your painting supplies. My suggestion, since we are working and filling the entire paper with paint, I would get one of the tan papers on the top of the drying rack, and I would go ahead and tape this with masking tape onto the paper. Prevent it from slipping when you're painting and make it easy to put on the drying rack. So I go ahead and put a little masking tape there, and then I'm going to tape it. So when you're ready to paint, you're going to have a paint palette. You might take, if it's just recently been washed, you might take your paper towel, dry the sections of the paint palette. We're going to work with, if you're doing monochromatic, you're going to work with, I want several sections of white. I'll probably do several sections of red and a couple of black. So when I go to mix, I like to mix with smaller brushes than bigger brushes. So I'm going to start by taking some red from here. I'm just going to take a little bit, and this one I'm going to stir up, and it's going to be very, very light. I'm going to take a little more this time. This one should be a little bit darker. So I have more red paint added this time, and then I can take even more red paint this time, so a bigger scoop of red. So with each one, I'm trying to make my color just a little bit darker so I can have some bigger changes in my tints. So what we're making right now, these are called tints. Could add some white to it, but remember, if you start with a darker color and add a lighter one to it, you're going to have to add twice to 3 times as much. And then now I'm ready for some shades. You don't want to have any white in your brush, because what happens is the white and the black react and you get gray. Okay? When you add gray to a color, you're actually creating what we call a tone. So you're actually making the color much more dull, not as bright and vibrant. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of black. Now remember, with black, things can change pretty quickly. Just want to do small amounts of black at first so that it doesn't go super, super dark. And try and get any of that extra paint back down in there. Okay, so that's pretty dark. I can take a little bit more here. So I think we've got some good shades there. So when you add black to a color, it's called a shade. When you add white to a color, you have what's called a tint. So I'm rinsing my brush out real well. Now, what I have found works out well for me when I paint like this, I like to start with my lightest color and then work my way down. I'm gonna grab my big brush, I'm gonna dip it in my paint, and I'm just gonna brush it across the whole paper. I don't wanna have any white paper showing through. Okay, now I'm gonna take my next color, I'm gonna paint right next to it. Now, where I have the two overlapping, I want them to merge. So I'm gonna grab what I call a dry brush or a mixing brush, and I'm just gonna go right over that line between the two. I'm gonna brush slightly up into my lighter color. What that does is it starts to mix the two colors together, and you have to do this when your paint is still wet, okay? So if you feel like it's not mixing quite well enough, two situations here. It might be that you don't have enough paint on the paper, or your paint might be dry. So you can see I added another layer here, and now I'm mixing between those two colors with my paintbrush, just going back and forth over that, but I never go all the way up, because if I did, I'd lose that really light area. And then this is my darker brush now, my non-mixing brush, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the darker next to it. Oops, got a few splotches there. If that happens, just blend them in. And I'm gonna take a little bit of the light paint and go back over the top there. And then again, I can kind of just blend between them. So constantly taking and blending. And again, you can also just dry it even on the side. You don't want a lot of paint in your brush when you're blending, okay? So you can wipe it on your newspaper next to you and get rid of that. And you just want to go over it, try and make it smooth. Again, if it's not getting very smooth, add some more paint to it, okay? Now that I've blended those, it's time for me to wash out my brushes. So I'm gonna rinse, dry them real well. So I'm using a paper towel to dry them. And now I'm gonna take my brush and I'm going to get my red. And I'm gonna make my red a little bit larger stretch. I've been drying my brush off to the side. And I'm gonna take and just blend a little bit up above here. Okay, so we've got that blended. And if I feel like the paint's being too see-through, you can always add a second coat. So now I'm ready for my shades. Okay, so I'm going to take my brush, I'm using my first shade, my lightest shade, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint that right on here. And then I'm going to take my red brush and mix between the two. I might even take a little more red and mix into my shade. And I can take a little bit more of my lightest shade, add it to the paper. Then I'm ready for my darker shade, so I take my brush. Now I'm going to take my darkest shade that I made. And it helps if you make your brush strokes go the full width of your paper. If you start in the middle, you can sometimes see where you start. So I would start at the edge and go all the way across. Then I'm going to take a little bit of black here, and I'm gonna mix just a little bit of red with it right on the paper. That's something else you want to watch as you're painting. Make sure that you pace yourself so that you have room for all of your tints and shades or whatever colors in your color scheme. So there you have how to paint and blend. Then you would do the same thing with your figure paper, but with whatever color you select for your figure paper. When you work with other colors, make sure that you're blending between colors that like to blend. So for example, if I picked complementary colors and I blended between the blue violet and the yellow orange, what's going to happen is I'm actually going to get brown. So make sure you're not blending your complementary colors together. If you mix colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel, so like going from red to orange or orange to yellow, you're going to have a better chance of them blending smoothly than if I was trying to blend yellow and blue. You can, but what you're going to find is wherever you blend them, you're going to get your green. So this is where understanding color mixing can really help you be successful in your final painting.